Okay, thanks, Shannon. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for being here. My name is Angela Duffy, and I'm a senior disability specialist at the Resource Center for Autism and Developmental Delays. I see a couple names that I recognize as attendees. Good not seeing you, but thank you for being here. Um, we're going to be talking about social narratives today, and that happens to be one of my favorite topics to talk about because I think they can be like so accessible to anyone. And you don't have to have like this amazing technology to be able to put them together. I've often just used paper and pencil and made books that way. I think once you know how to write them, um, you feel really comfortable about like the flow of how the social narrative is written, then you can just, keep writing more and more. And they're just so beneficial to our children. Before I start talking about social narratives, I'm going to briefly go over our resource room. um, there we go. Let me see here. All right. So we are located in Chicago at 1640 West Roosevelt. We are on the University of Illinois Chicago campus. And we have recently moved to this location. We used to be at two different locations on the south and west side of Chicago. And we recently moved to the 1640 location, and we are now open by appointment only for services there. We're a resource room, so we provide resources like our lending library, where you can check out materials working on different things like math skills, reading skills, language development, social emotional skills, fine motor, gross motor. There's so many different things in our library. We also meet with families as well as teachers and paraprofessionals and therapists at the center, um, discussing, maybe different issues that they might be having at home or in the classroom or in the community. And we then develop these visual supports that can really help, with these challenges that their child or student might be having. And you can see in the top picture there some of the examples of visual supports that we can make, like the visual schedule. We make a communication book that's very similar to the PEX one, except for we use, binders and materials that we get from like Office Depot, Office Max. You can see we have some example social stories, social narratives, and then, some other various work systems and to-do lists. And then at the bottom picture there, we have some example adapted books, which are really great for teaching literacy to our children. And that's another thing I really like to do, make those adapted books with the interactive pieces that go in the books. We also have other workshops, so this is not our only one. We do some other workshops that are all virtual, and you can register for those. We have a monthly newsletter that goes out, and you can register for that through our website. And you can see at the last bullet point there, our website. You can visit our virtual resource room, and we have a lot of different downloadable visual supports, social narratives, and structured activities like interactive books, file folder activities, a bunch of things, tip sheets, handouts. And you can go there to the arcad.uic.edu. With regards to the workshops, here's some other examples of workshops that we offer. We do offer an Understanding Autism, 7 Considerations of Autism and the IEP, as well as tips and tools for homes and schools. And that one really goes over a lot of those visual schedules and those work systems, as well as structured activities that we use with our children. And all free, thanks to our funders, like the Autism Program of Illinois, Department of Family and Support Services, Head Start. And as I said before, we are on the UIC campus. We are under the umbrella of the College of Education Center for Literacy. All right, so that's a little bit about the Resource Center and what I do and, you know, what I love to do there, making the visual supports and structured activities, as well as these social narratives. It's, you know, really wonderful to be able to incorporate my art background. I actually have a Bachelor of Fine Arts in addition to a Master's of Special Education. So I kind of am able to combine both of those, which is really great to be able to, you know, support our children. All right, so let's get into our workshop, our training. I hope today that you leave with a better understanding of social narratives and how they can really benefit individuals with autism or other related disorders. So, you know, your child might not have autism, but maybe they have some anxieties in certain areas, maybe a generalized anxiety, and especially like with new situations, it could be really challenging going into those, like meeting new people or going to a new place, or maybe going to an event that's brand new. These social narratives can really help, you know, with our children and adults as well. We'd like to understand when a social narrative can be used. So thinking about those different times throughout our, you know, individual's life that, you know, might be really helpful to actually, like, you know, think ahead and plan ahead and, and write one of these social narratives. And finally, we'd like to talk about how we're actually going to write the social narrative, what it's going to look like what do I put in there? What am I supposed to write? You know, we want to go over that. And then, of course, how to use the social narrative with the individual that you work with or that you live with. So, yeah, before I begin, I don't know if it's possible, you guys, I think, have access to the chat. Are you able to put in there if you are a parent or a teacher or therapist, and then like what age range you work with? I always like to know who's in the audience. I recognize a couple teachers and therapists. I was wondering if we had any parents here. And then I do see a hand raised. If you have a question, if you could type it in. I don't know if Shannon, do we have access to if somebody unmutes?
No, but if they can type it in, that would be great.
Okay, awesome. Yeah, if you can just, you know, type into the chat what age group you work with. If you know, like I said, if you're a parent, caregiver, grandparent. Does the chat not work, Shannon? It's the Q&A.
It is the Q&A. I apologize.
Oh,
Yep,
that's
so
okay.
just type it in. Yep,
Then I won't be looking at the chat. Okay, great. Oh,
yep.
we have a parent. Thank you, Beatrice.
Mhm.
11-year-old. You have an 11-year-old son. Okay, thank you for being here. And Qualisha, thank you for being here. You're a BCBA. Great. So we have some professionals here, early childhood special education, developmental therapist. Thank you, Sarah. Um, Bess, thank you for being here. You're a parent. Rachel, a parent. Awesome. So we kind of have a nice mix of parents and professionals, looks like. Grandparents. Thank you, Bruce. I'm glad you're here. Okay, great. So I'm going to give this is perfect. I'm going to give some examples of social narratives like in the classroom and then also like home community type settings. Okay, perfect. Thank you guys for typing in there. I appreciate it. Okay, so before we get into social narratives, I do want to talk a little bit about autism. This is just going to be very brief. just because we do an understanding autism training and it's very much more in depth, and we're just gonna go through it sort of quickly, but I think it's important that we talk about it and how it relates to social narratives. Okay. So autism is a neurodevelopmental disorder. And, it's a huge word, obviously, but like we can always break it down into two words, right? Neuro and then developmental. Neuro referring to the brain, and developmental referring to those typical milestones, that we see our children meeting as they grow and develop. Individuals with autism sometimes don't meet they don't meet the milestones when they are supposed to, or maybe they're meeting the milestones and then they're losing those skills, and then we're saying, okay, something's going on. And that's when we might, we do want to go and get them screened and figure out like what is going on exactly, whether it is autism or if it's something else. And then autism is a spectrum disorder. So individuals with autism lie along this very wide spectrum. And of course, we got to keep that in mind when we're making these visual supports and social narratives. Like, where does the individual fall along the spectrum? They can fall along the spectrum in, some areas, maybe, not being as well developed in their like social skills, so maybe they're falling more on the left side of the spectrum, but then falling more maybe along the right side of the spectrum in other areas, like maybe their motor skills are really good. So there's like so many different spectrums, and we gotta keep those in mind. And then it also impacts two core areas. So we're talking about social communication and social interaction, as well as restricted, repetitive patterns of behaviors. And in order to get a diagnosis of autism, the individual has to have deficits in both of these core areas. All right, let's just talk about that first core area, social interaction and social communication. And this is taken directly from the DSM. We have to see deficits in all three of these areas to be diagnosed with autism. The first is social emotional reciprocity. So reduced sharing of interests, emotions, failure to initiate or respond to social interactions. This is where we see our children not really being able to understand like how another person might be feeling in a certain situation, or not being able to really like relate to another person. And this is where I think like these social narratives can really help, because if we can include the perspective of another person in that situation, then the individual has a better understanding of what is going on, and then like how they could react, what would be an appropriate way of reacting. So maybe taking say your friend falls on the playground and hurts themselves, perhaps the autistic child might not be able to understand like, oh, okay, I need to go over and comfort my friend. But in this social narrative, this is one thing we can talk about. Okay, what happens, when somebody gets hurt? How can I react appropriately? What can I do? How is my friend feeling right now? And that, can really help with these, the idea of theory of mind, like the idea that somebody else has a different thought and feeling than you do, so that's one way I think these social narratives can really help. The second area in this main core area is nonverbal communicative behaviors used for social interaction. So our individuals, they can have a lot of difficulty really understanding the nonverbal communication, and that can include facial expressions, gestures, even like body movements, is the person making eye contact with me? Do they look like they're interested in what I'm saying? Are they backing away? You know, maybe I've talked for the last 15 minutes about a topic that I'm really into, but you know, my friend might not be as into, and they haven't gotten a word in edgewise. You know, these are the things that, again, I think social narratives can really help with. You know, having these stories and being able to explain these situations, and then you know, obviously giving time for our individual to practice, and you know, lots of practice, right? That's really, really important. But the social narrative is a good way to introduce these ideas. And finally, developing, maintaining, and understanding relationships. This is so, so hard for a lot of autistic children and adults. You know, being able to make these lasting friendships can be such a challenge, but it's so important, you know, like we all want to have friends, and we want to you know, have people in our lives that care about us and we can care about them, but it can be really challenging if you don't quite understand, you know, all the nuances of the social world, and how important it is to make a friend that has the same interests and you know, things that they love to talk about and love to do. That can be really challenging for our kids and adults. All right, so that's the first core area. Now I'm going to go over the second core area, which is restrictive and repetitive patterns of behavior. To get a diagnosis for autism, an individual needs to have deficits in 2 out of these 4 areas. The first is stereotyped or repetitive motor movements, use of objects or speech. I put the, you know, like it's the picture that usually comes up, you know, with the lining up of toys. That's just one area in this first area. We also see individuals STEM, so we might see hand flapping, pacing, you know, vocal stems, laughing, humming. Those are like the types of things that we might see, you know, for this first area there. The second being insistence on sameness, inflexible adherence to routines or ritualized patterns of verbal or nonverbal behavior. A lot of autistic individuals, you know, really like the same routine, or the same, using the same things in their life. You know, it creates structure, and it creates you know, where they know what to expect, and that often, you know, decreases a lot of that anxiety that they might just already have. I put the picture of a cup here because, you know, I know a lot of autistic children, you know, they want the same cup, and maybe they have a cup that they have for water and a cup that they have for milk. And if you switch that around and put the milk in the water cup and the water in the milk cup, you might see some behaviors, right? Um, and I think this is an area where social narratives can also help with, um, just because like there's change in everyone's life, right? We all have like things that we can't plan for, you know, and it comes up and it's a surprise. But then there's a lot of change that happens that we actually can plan for. Um, for example, you might know that your child is going to a different school next year. That's a huge change in their life, right? Um, you can write a social narrative about the new school, their new teacher, um, you know, what's going to happen at the new school, any changes that might be like things that might be different from the new school versus their current school. That way they're aware of, you know, this change in their life, and it can often help. The third area is highly restricted, fixated interests that are abnormal in intensity or focus. Um, you might wonder what that picture is. That's actually a Play-Doh rendering of South America done by my autistic nephew Clark when he was 4, I think. He's 10 now, so this was a while ago, and his intense interest in what he would talk for hours about was maps of the world, maps of different countries. And this was just something he loved to do. He loved making these Play-Doh maps. He didn't even need like another picture to model it after. He was just like, doing this, and as he's going through, he's naming the different countries in South America. So that's just one example. I know you all have examples of intense interest. It could be Pokemon, it could be sports statistics. Somebody said potatoes once in one of my trainings. I mean, yeah, potatoes, that could be an interest. I've heard elevators, vacuums. Um, these interests could be incorporated into the social narrative. If there's something that your child or student likes, if they're into Pokemon, I think you can incorporate that into the social narrative. I made a social narrative for my daughter, and I incorporated Daniel Tiger because at the time she was really into Daniel Tiger. I think it just helps draw their interest, and it's something that they really enjoy. All right, so the last area is we're talking about like different sensory profiles. Autistic individuals can have a hyper or hypo reactivity or sensitivity to sensory input or unusual interests in sensory aspects of the environment. And, all the different senses we have, sight, smell, taste, touch, sound. There's so much going on, and our individuals can have a hyper where they're experiencing too much input. That's hyper. Maybe they're experiencing like really loud sounds. It might sound normal to you or I, but it might be like really really loud for them, or maybe the lights are too bright. Maybe the tags in their clothes are really bothering them, or the seams on their underclothes or socks. That's like hyper. And then hypo sensitivity is the exact opposite, where they're like craving that input. They're needing the loud noises. I had a student once that would carry around those musical toys, for like really young children, and put it up to his ear and, push the button, and then it would be really loud next to his ear. He really, really liked that loud sound. So that's just, some of the different things that we do need to also think about, when we're writing social narratives, and we can definitely incorporate that into the social narrative, thinking about like different situations and maybe different places and events, like going to the movies. If you're writing a social narrative about going to the movies and your child has a lot of trouble with like loud sounds, and how in the movies, like when it first starts, when the movie first starts, it's like really really loud. That's something you can prepare them for. Maybe they want to wear headphones in the beginning, and then as the movie gets going, maybe they get used to the sound and can take off the headphones. Those are some things that you can put into the social narrative to help the child in that situation. Okay, so with social interaction, we know, many of our kids have some challenges here, or maybe a lot of challenges, depending upon where they're falling on the spectrum. Some of our kids, they may appear that they are not interested in interacting with others. That could be the case. They might not be interested. They might be interested, very interested, and just not know what to do. Like, what's the appropriate thing to say? Am I, going to say something, and then is another child going to laugh at me? Like, that can produce a lot of anxiety. We have other children, on the other end of that spectrum that they're interested and they're going to go for it and they're going to do their best. And sometimes it may be a score, and then other times it might not work out. So these supports, like the social narratives and then incorporating different visuals, that really helps with these social situations. And we just have to keep in mind that we want to individualize these depending upon the needs of the individual. All right, so what is a social narrative? Pretty simple. It's a short story, and we're going to use words and or pictures. With mine, I'm writing a lot of social narratives for like young children, so preschool age, early elementary, even up through like junior high. I'm including words and pictures. The pictures, if we can, we try to make them really specific to the situation using like photographs if possible, just so that it's, easily understand by the child or student. But these stories, we want to improve the understanding of a situation. So, maybe it is like, how do I ask another, one of my friends, one of my peers to play? Or, I mean, it could seem simple to us, but like, this can be really challenging. Like, in junior high, how do I ask one of my classmates to go to the movies this weekend? Like, what's appropriate? What's a good way of asking? Maybe a different event, like a new baby in the family. Maybe they're in sports and it's their first, say they're in soccer and it's their first tournament coming up in a couple weeks, and maybe they're really, really nervous about this. We can write a social narrative about the tournament, the big game, and what's going to happen, and how can they feel? How maybe will others feel? Like, what if they lose the game? And how should they react? They might want to react like maybe screaming or being really mad. It's understandable to be mad, but what can you do to be a good sports show good sportsmanship, giving the other team members a high five or what, I'm saying, like, these are some things that we can talk about in the social narrative. A different, maybe a new place that they're going to. So I talked about school. Maybe you've switched dentists and you want to write a social narrative about a new dentist or a new doctor, a new person in the child's life. Maybe you're getting a new babysitter, a new teacher. These are all different ideas of things that you can write social narratives about. We do sometimes interchange social narratives with social story. They mean the same thing. The term social story was developed by Carol Gray in 1990. If you want to get the history on social stories, Carol Gray was working in a high school and she developed the social stories to help with her high school students. That's kind of the basic idea of it. But if you want to get some other examples, social stories, and more of the history, you can go to her website. All right. Now, I've already talked a little bit about why we use social narratives, but I do want to, go over it a little bit more. So like I said, individuals with autism can have a lot of challenges understanding the social world. Even individuals that I'm sorry, let me go back to this. There could be challenges with understanding like inappropriate versus appropriate things to say. It could be even as simple as like understanding like there could be a really long line. Well, you're not supposed to cut in front of the line, you have to wait in line, right? could be interrupting, like not interrupting somebody while they're talking. That's really important in the classroom, right? The importance of raising your hand and waiting. These are all things that these social narratives can really help with. And we do want to incorporate perspective sentences into social narratives. So we're talking about like being able to understand what somebody else is thinking, or how they're feeling in that situation. And, it could be different than the way that the autistic individual is feeling, and that's okay. But, how can they act in that situation? And it's very important to teach this, through the social narratives, and then, through using other visuals and through practice, lots and lots of practice. These social narratives really help decrease the anxiety, the worry, the frustration that, could really stop an individual in their tracks, when a certain situation is coming up. Maybe they just completely shut down and, just not want to go through with it at all, and that's not good, because, we want to be able to have our individuals, um, being in these situations and feeling comfortable, and when we don't have anxiety, or we have very low anxiety, we're at our best selves, and we're enjoying ourselves. And so that it's just so important, that we do this. And we want to make sure that this information is presented visually. So obviously social narratives, social stories, they're very visual. They are done in the individual's like best learning style, so oftentimes that is visual. Autistic individuals are visual learners in many cases, so it's important that we present it that way to them. All right, let me see here, we got a question. Are there any series of books or visual stories for kids that you suggest to emphasize social narratives? Oh, you have a 4-year-old. Okay. So Carol Gray has written a lot of books on social stories. For the 4-year-old, yes. So I don't know if you've heard of there's a series of books, they're all board books. There's like cleanup time, sharing time, bye-bye time. They're all written by Elizabeth Verdick, Verdick. I'm sure, I know I saw an early childhood special educator out there. I bet you have those in your classroom. They're nice. They're like really short, kind of rhymey stories. I would say like Daniel Tiger books are really good. The Daniel Tiger just episodes, I think, go over so many great, appropriate, situations that like a preschooler could be going through. And then of course, like with the songs and the rhyming, that really helps. So yeah, I mean, there are plenty more. I can I'm going to be giving you a list of websites that have example social narratives further on in the presentation. So you'll definitely get to go through those. And then if you wanted to like email me separately, I can send you some other, ideas. But I hope that answered part of your question. That's a good question. All right. Now I need you guys to get back in that Q&A, okay? Because I need you to type in the Q&A some answers for me, okay? We want to think about, like, you can think specifically to yourself, like, okay, now why would I be writing a social narrative? Is there something coming up maybe at home that I can write a social narrative about, or maybe at school, or maybe there's something going on in the community? Now type in, and I said type into the chat box, but type into the Q&A a time maybe when you are when you have used a social narrative in the past, and maybe it worked out, maybe it didn't, or a time that maybe you're thinking about right now, like, oh yeah, this is coming up. I can actually try, what Angela is talking about. All right. Yeah, going to the dentist. I actually have an example, one of those right here. My going to the dentist social narrative. Because, gosh, dentists, oof, it's rough for all of us, right? You know, it, it doesn't feel right when they're cleaning and doing the x-rays. It can hurt sometimes. And it can be really scary for kids, especially like when they see these tools, like, what are these used for? Is this going to poke me? So having the social narrative can help. I think having like a visual to-do list at the dentist helps too. You can show like the picture cards, say, okay, so this is what you're doing now. You are putting on your sunglasses. Okay, check, that's done. Next, the dentist is going to move your chair back. That can be surprising to a kid, right? Like if it just suddenly happens. So showing that picture ahead of time is really helpful. All right, another area, something different at school, yes, because there are always different situations at school. So maybe a concert or an assembly, a field trip, or a fire drill. Oh gosh, those fire drills, that can be so loud. Yeah, having that, social narrative ahead of time, and I think that writing these and then providing them to the whole class, even if there are individual students in the class that don't have autism, it can still be helpful because, this can be a surprise to anyone. The fire drill, the field trips. Um, Okay, someone else said vacations. Oh my gosh, yes. I wrote a social narrative for a family that was taking a road trip for the very first time to Florida for a wedding. And it was the first time the child was ever going to go to a wedding. So there was a lot of firsts. So actually, like, we wrote the social narrative together and they gave me photos I was able to put in. And the child was really successful at this. And had a good time at the wedding and had fun in Florida. And, I know the family was happy and the child was really, happy and proud that they could do it. I also have a social narrative on the website that I was talking about going in an airport and like going through security and waiting for the airplane, like all those different things. So check out the ARCAD website if you want the airport social narrative. You guys are doing so great. I love these ideas. Holidays, yes, thank you. What do we do on a holiday? Who will we be meeting? What are we getting? Yeah, there's all these different holidays, and every holiday has different customs, and maybe like different families do different things. So yeah, that's so important. Um, and let's see, for homeschool and yeah, scheduling like different schedules in the summer for sure. Going to horse camp, maybe it's their first time at this brand new camp. Definitely like get pictures and get specifics, so that you can include that in the social narrative. Like, love those ideas. Thank you. All right, so now we know when we might be using a social narrative, and then how are we going to write these, right? They can include pictures. Like I said, I often do use photos if possible. um, if I don't have a photo, I'll go to Google Images and I'll search and I'll maybe find a clip art image. You guys saw my dentist social narrative. Like, this is a board maker image. Um, we're going to write these narratives according to the child's needs or at their level. So, when you're actually writing, the language that you use needs to be understood by your child. So don't use these huge words if your child doesn't understand the words. If your child does, then that's great. You know your child. And then this is so important. My third bullet point, make sure you use materials that you have access to. You know, if you don't have access to a printer, laminator, that's okay. You know, you can, if you have access to a computer, you can still make a social narrative on the computer and save it as a PDF. And then the child can use their tablet or maybe a phone or their laptop, desktop, and read the social narrative from the screen. That's okay. If you don't have any of those things, you can write out the social narrative just using paper. I have two examples here. Just using like printer paper, you know, the what is this, 8.5 by 11, folding it in half. With this one, I did 1, 2, 3 staples and made a book. With my other example, I folded it in half and I took yarn and I put the yarn through the book and I made a binding this way. Maybe some of you have done this in school. I think it's totally fine. You know, some of us are better artists than others. I am an artist, but I did I did stick images just to show that you can, you know, draw stick figures and it's okay. And then, you know, just start writing. Before I start like actually just writing in the book, I do like to take a sheet of paper and jot my ideas down. So it is a good idea to really, you know, get the ideas, like what's going to go on each page. So I wrote down my sentences and then I numbered. I know you guys can't see, but I think you get the idea, right? I numbered. So page 1 was going to have these sentences, page 2 these, and so on. And this way you can, you know, cross things out and rewrite them. It's kind of like what you did in school, right? With like a rough draft, you do a rough draft first, and then you do your final. All right. Going back to if you do have a computer, if you have access to certain programs, I prefer to use Microsoft Publisher. That's kind of my go-to for writing social narratives, just because it's really easy to import images. So import those photos and maybe the clip art or whatever you're getting from the internet, import it into the program, and then move around the images and, you know, make them bigger, smaller. You can crop. You can actually, like, if you have a big picture and you just want to show like a part of that picture, you can crop the image really easily in Publisher. And then, you know, putting your text box, and then you can kind of figure out like the size of the font and, you know, all that, like what fits. PowerPoint works too. I prefer Publisher, but PowerPoint works too. What doesn't really work is Word. I don't really like using Microsoft Word. Have you guys tried to put images in Microsoft Word and then try to move around images and text? It does not work so well. It just ends up being very frustrating. So yeah, I hope if you do have access to those programs, you give that a try. All right. So with the actual like written part of social narratives, we do always write them in a first person point of view. So you're going to be using I, even though I know you're not writing it for yourself, you're writing it for your child or student, but you still use I because that's how they're reading it. Okay. We also want to use positive language. And, you know, that's something that I often get like people saying, well, I want, you know, a social narrative about not hitting. My child is hitting everyone. I'm not going to write a social narrative about not hitting. We need to write a social narrative about why the child is hitting, and, you know, what they can do and how we can help them so that they don't feel the need to hit, you know. So we do want to focus on like what to do rather than what not to do. Okay. We want the language, as I said before, really important though, like write the social narrative at the same level as your child. Even if they're not reading it to themselves, if you're reading it to them, they still need to understand like what you're saying, right? So that's really, really important. And you're going to use different types of sentences in the social narrative, and we'll go over these. Descriptive, perspective, directive, and affirmative sentences. And to describe these sentences, I've written a social narrative about circle time and why it's important to like raise your hand during circle time. Okay. So for descriptive, we want to answer those WH questions like where will the activities occur, who is involved, and what will happen. So my example is I have circle time every day. Circle time is for listening and learning new things. Sometimes I talk during circle time when it is not my turn. All right, so you see I'm using I, that first person point of view, and we're just, giving the child the information. Like, this is what's going on. You're talking when you're not supposed to. So, like, what can you do? Okay, so next we're going to go over perspective sentences. These perspective sentences describe reactions and feelings of your child and of other people. Like I said, the whole like theory of mind thing, like how are other people feeling and what are they thinking and how should I react? How are they reacting? Okay, my example is if I talk when the teacher is talking, the teacher will be upset because I'm not paying attention to her. Other kids may get upset because they can't hear the teacher. And you see I have that, example there. Okay, the next type of sentence is the directive. That's where you're going to tell your child what to do in the situation. So I will try to listen to the teacher during circle time so I can learn new things and have fun. If I want to talk, I will try to remember to raise my hand and wait quietly to be called on. All right, and you have that visual, the raise hand visual, which could then be used during the situation as that quick visual. Maybe you have it on a lanyard or a ring of visuals. You can use that as a quick reminder if the child starts to not raise their hand. Oh, don't forget, raise your hand. You don't have to say that. You can just show the picture. All right. And the affirmative, we always want to confirm and let our children know that the social situation or their actions or whatever it is, we're writing in the social narrative, that they're positive, it's good. Circle time is fun. You can put circle time can be fun. Circle time might not be fun for everyone, and that's okay. I can be proud of myself when I remember to listen to the teacher. All right, so those are the different sentences that you can use, you should use, and you should use a good, mix of sentences. We don't want to have all directives and we don't want to have all descriptive sentences. A good ratio of sentences, and, it can be kind of loose, but I use about one directive for every 2 to 5 descriptive and or perspective sentences. So my example here for cutting nails, I don't know how many of your kids have trouble with this. It can be a challenge. But my example is when my nails get too long, my mom needs to cut them, or grandma needs to cut them, or dad needs to cut them, whoever. If my nails are too long, they might break and scratch me or someone else. I should sit still while my nails are being cut. I might be scared of the clippers, and that's okay. I can close my eyes, take a deep breath, and try to relax. After my nails are cut, they won't be as sharp. So you see how I included a good mixture of sentences here. All right, I have another example of a social narrative because honestly, right now, you guys just need to be, reading a lot of different examples. And, I often take different examples and maybe plug in some of my information. And, that's a good way to learn how to write a social narrative. Take somebody else's social narrative and just plug in your information. But my example, and this was real, like I had a parent come to me and they said that their 3-year-old child, they have a cat named Liam, and Sam loves to play with Liam, but Sam often gets excited when he plays with Liam, the cat. And when this happens, Sam will start chasing Liam and try to grab the cat's tail. How can we write a social narrative that will help Sam understand how to appropriately play with Liam? Well, we want to, lay it out there, like what's happening. We have to get perspective, like how might Sam feel? How might Liam be feeling? I know it sounds crazy to say, but yeah, we need to say how the cat might be feeling, right? This is important. The cat is a very big part of the situation. And we want to give Sam, good strategies and ideas, give them directives, what he can do. And then we want to affirm that Sam is making a good choice. So here's my story about Sam and Liam, and I use Publisher for this. All right, I have a cat in my family named Liam. Liam and I have been friends since I was born. So here we have the descriptive, and here's Liam and Sam. I changed the names. I love Liam, and Liam loves me. Liam really loves when I pet him gently. It makes him feel very happy. It makes me feel happy too. So here we have, some perspective here and, some directive, like this is what, you can do. You can pet him gently. Liam also really likes when I give him treats. I can ask my mom if I can give him a treat. We can't give Liam too many treats or he might feel sick. So again, this is what we can do. I want Liam to be happy and feel safe when he's around me. If I start getting excited and chase Liam or grab Liam, he might start to feel scared and might not want to be around me. Okay, so there's some perspective there, right? This is what's going on. This is how Liam feels. But here is what Sam can do. There are things I can do when I start to feel excited. I can chase mom, jump, hit the drums or a pillow, or ask for a burrito wrap. And these were some sensory things, that we talked about. The OT really helped with ideas on what to do. So here we have, photos of what it looks like, what we can do. Rather than grabbing Liam's tail, you can do these things, Sam. If I need help, I can ask my family what I can do to calm my body. My family is happy when I'm gentle around Liam. Liam and I feel very happy too. All right, so that just, ends with a nice affirmative, like this is good, this is what you should do. Here are my websites with some free downloadable social narratives. And you don't need to quickly jot these down because we don't really have a lot of time. If you want this PowerPoint, Shannon said that you can email her and then she'll send you the PowerPoint. And then that way you guys can just link to these websites, okay? Like I said before, our CAD has a lot of social narratives. We have spring break, winter break, summer break, social narrative, going in the toilet. That's bilingual, Spanish, English. We also have the girl one too. And then the airport social narrative. Okay, so how do I use a social narrative? It is so important when you're reading this to your child that they're calm and they're available, ready to learn. Okay, and that could be maybe on the floor, beanbag chairs, or maybe on the couch, wherever your child feels comfortable. We're going to read it, really casually, comfortably. This is not something that you're supposed to read to your child if it's I don't know, some people use it as almost like a punishment, oh, you did this, you hit the child, come here, we're reading the social narrative. Well, no, that's not a good way to use a social narrative. We're going to introduce it when the child is happy, when they they're fed, they are well rested, they're ready to learn. And depending upon the story, maybe you're going to review it every day before the event happens, or maybe, it could just be weekly. Maybe it's a social situation that you read every day, and then you decrease the amount of reading to maybe just weekly. Or, it could be right before the situation. It depends upon why you're writing the social narrative. And I say not all social stories or narratives can and should be faded or should be faded. We could often, just use that visual, like that raising hand social narrative I showed you. You could just, move to just read, showing the raised hand visual, rather than having to read that all the time. And yeah, so that's how to use a social narrative. I want to make sure we have time for questions. So quickly wrapping up, social narratives can help decrease anxiety, worry, frustration. We want to write the narratives according to the child's needs or level of understanding. Introduce them. So, read the social narrative, have your child read the social narrative if they can, when they are calm and available to learn, and then review and practice with a frequency that makes sense to the situation. And we have 3 minutes left. If anybody has any questions, sorry I went through that in part a little fast, but I think it's best if you guys just go to the examples on your own, um, and look through them and, maybe take different ideas from different social narratives. Like when you're first writing, it's okay to borrow, I think, someone else's ideas when you're first writing a social narrative. Because practice, I think that's the best way, for you to get comfortable with this. All right, any questions about how to write one or nothing? All right, you
Oh,
guys had good questions throughout, so thank you.
yes. And I put my contact information in the chat for anyone interested in those slides. I'm happy
Awesome.
to share those with you. And all these great examples that you're providing.
Great. Yeah. And people can email me, that's in the PowerPoint. If you have any questions, I've had people email me social narratives that they've written, and I've gone through and I've like given just little, maybe tweaks that could be done, or like, oh, no, that's perfect, so that's something that you can do as well.